Hey Norm, how are you doing?
I'm doing well today.
How many days of sobriety is it now?
I'm on 54, closing in on 60 real quick.
Congratulations, Norm.
Thank you.
What do you think about this question of defunding the police?
I think that is an absolute insane idea myself. I can't imagine how the quality of law enforcement can go up without funding. That is ludicrous. I don't know where that rumor got started, and I don't know why it got started, because that's going from the frying pan to the fire. It makes no sense at all to me.
So, are you aware? Some people feel like police officers are getting out of hand and like they're overstepping their authority and abusing the American people as a result. I believe this is why people think defunding the police would be a benefit. But can you tell us why you feel like defunding the police would not help those things?
Well, I agree. The critical points you just mentioned I agree with all of them, but defunding it's not the answer. My opinion, 4 years of academy training for everybody with a badge and gun in this country, with psychological screening and psychological training along the way of those whole 4 years, would be a better bet, putting more money into the education of the police force before they go out and do their job.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I think simply training the police better, differently, with more training would be helpful.
Yeah, most of the state police forces require 4 years academy training, but often city, county, town cops don't need more than a 3-month certificate from a community college, and well-connected generations deep in those small places tend to probably just get a paper signed and not even have to do the 3 months.
You know, it occurs to me though that maybe the police officers aren't the only ones who could use new training in this area. Maybe we could start training citizens on how they interact with the police.
Yes, I agree
and
with that.
I think perhaps when people are going through driver's ed training when they're young, maybe if we added that in as a part of the driver's ed training, just ways to speak to and interact with law enforcement if they're approaching you while you're driving your vehicle. I think maybe some training with young people on how to communicate in stressful situations, because a lot of times I think it's not the cop getting abusing his authority that is the problem. I think a lot of times it's a misunderstanding on the part of the person who's interacting with the police officer. Like the most recent incident, the black man who was sleeping in his car in the drive-through, and apparently there was some misunderstanding, I think, because when he was running from the police is when he got shot, you know what I mean? But he had the police taser and was being threatening with it and stuff. And nobody should take a police officer's weapon and flee the scene with it. He really needed to be stopped. But
No.
but I think maybe if that guy had better training on how to deal with a police officer,
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of them subconscious training takes over, and they shoot for vital areas rather than a leg to just try to drop them, and that's the subconscious comes out in the instance. So from the training, so they're not always thinking consciously at the moment about where they're shooting and how they're shooting. Not to downplay a wrongful death in any way. I mean, that still seems a bit excessive for stealing a taser. I mean, he's not necessarily going to kill somebody with that, but.
Well, to me, a taser, when a police officer is carrying a taser on them, that is part of their weaponry to be used in their line of work, which is law enforcement. That's not something the general public should be engaging in. And so when a member of the general public steals or takes possession of a police officer's a firearm or the tools he or she uses in the line of duty, and they're running with it, and that's something they can use to hurt or kill somebody with, which can be done with a taser, I think it's a very serious thing.
Oh yeah, they have to be stopped. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt about it. They have, it's the equivalent of military hardware. I mean, you know, and you can't have the civil population running around with those instruments. You know, that could cause a huge amount of injuries or deaths.
And yes, and also apparently the guy had some mental illness and was demonstrating that. And so I'm sure the police officer saw all of that, you know. I mean, he was there in the situation. I think oftentimes there's extenuating circumstances when there's a police shooting and there's outside stuff that's going on at that moment, you know, that the general public isn't really thinking about. And so that's kind of the way I'm trying to view this particular police shooting, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, people often react to the outcome and don't investigate the variables involved in the situation up to that point. And often people are just looking for an excuse to create mayhem, almost anarchy, if you will.
Well, I could be completely wrong about my take on the situation. This is just something I think this may be something to explain why the police officer shot that man. But all I want to point out is that right now there's a lot of people in our country who are just hating on police officers and jumping to the conclusion that when a police officer shoots somebody in the line of duty, that the police officer has always done it in the wrong. And it's not necessary that it's always in the wrong. And so I just want to make sure that we stop and look at these situations one at a time, you know what I mean, individually, instead of judging all police shootings by the one scope of when, you know, we were so also angry when we watched George. I mean, I say watch, I listened. When we all observed the video of him being murdered by that awful police officer, it made us all so angry. But we need to remember that that's not always the situation, you know what I mean?
No.
And we need to remember our police officers need us to back them as well, because we need law and order in this country.
You don't hear about the 99% of arrests going down properly and safely. You only hear about the 1 or less percent through media hype that is the bad stuff. And that's why people get crazy, because they're not hearing enough of the good reports countering the few bad reports.
Exactly. And now look what's happened to our country, because everybody got hot heads and went off the handle.
They've even taken the show cops off the air, I heard.
Did you know that they've even been murdering black cops? There have even been black people murdered in these riots. And all this is done supposedly because George was murdered unjustly, right? But so why are all these other people, all these innocent people dying because of it? You know, it just doesn't make any sense.
Let's go back to Dallas. You know, I mean, look at that. One guy nuts with the machine gun massacring, and you had officers of every race, color, creed, gender, background, you know, standing there taking bullets for the citizens, you know? And, you know, nobody's bringing that up, you know? I mean, and maybe it's been a decade since that happened, and the next generation doesn't remember any of it, you know? And that's another problem. Even our generation is just as guilty, the United States, for not educating properly on civil duty of the citizen and the political science factor of how to work your government for the people, by the people. If it was taught in K through 12, both those subjects mandatorily, this would not be happening, none of this.
Another thing that is not taught is what our constitutional rights are. And that's something I think needs to be taught.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that falls in the political science category, in my opinion. I mean, call it what you will, but American history itself, that really is not the big deal, because it's good to know where we came from, but it's more important to know how to get where we're going.
Oh, but Norm, I think it's important to learn from American history, because if we don't learn from our mistakes in the past, we're doomed to repeat them.
Well, exactly. That's
And
why it has to be
America,
taught
like all other
12
countries,
years.
has made mistakes.
I think it's got to be taught all 12 years, well, 13 years, K through 12. I think all that, the history, the way the political system works, and how the people can work it through petitioning, through their calling their congressman, through writing letters. I too am just as guilty for not doing it. I come up with these ideas, but am I making the calls and writing the letters? No. But if I was taught every year in school, if that was a mandatory class, I bet you I'd be approaching it a lot differently.
Norm, are you aware? I know that maybe you don't have access to the news as much as I do, but are you aware that right now there's people in our country who are tearing down and destroying our history? They're trying to tear down and destroy our history so they can rewrite it. Does that concern you?
Well, I don't know if most of this young adult generation even knows any of the history to begin with, to tell you the truth.
Well, it's important that we share the truth with them before it's all destroyed.
Well, do we even know what the real truth is ourselves?
Well, maybe we don't, but I know that what's being told to these young people is not working because of all of the craziness that's going on in our country. Obviously, the message they've received is not the correct one. It's not the one that will help them build America and make America great again and become the productive young people that we know they can be.
Well, it would be if they arrest everybody that's vandalizing things and ruining things and stealing things and make them actually go and rebuild what they destroyed and without any pay.
So this is a crazy idea I had. So, there's all these people destroying stuff, right? So all this stuff needs to be fixed. And there's all these people who need jobs, right? So maybe the government should pay all these unemployed people to fix everything. You know what I mean? So everything will be rebuilt and fixed and cleaned up, and everybody will have jobs for a while. And then once everything's fixed and cleaned up, then the businesses will be ready to go back to, maybe that's crazy, but
if they restructured it and it wasn't so Monday through Friday and weekends were still considered a separate issue and all that, you could have very easily 3 shifts on most jobs going, except for obviously the certain public venues. It would definitely, that would solve it. Nobody works over 40 hours a week. Everybody gets, their 40 hours and 3 shifts going 7 days a week. Okay, Sunday's the day of rest. Fine. If that's your religion, then you don't work that day. If you're an atheist, you work on Sunday, there you go. Whatever.
What do you do if you're unable to work?
Well, you have to take advantage of the government programs. But I can attest that it does not make ends meet, that's for sure. I mean, half of the minimum wage per month is not carrying me through the month. I'm still, even clean, I'm still broke halfway through the month. It's just the way it is. There's no way around it. I receive actually less than, in my pocket, I get less than half the minimum wage per month.
Anyway, so Norm, the idea of defunding the police and no longer having police around to call, as a disabled woman, terrifies me. You know what I mean? There have been times over the years where I've called the police because I feel like I'm in danger or I feel like I'm threatened, me or my family. You know what I mean? How do you feel as a blind man? How do you feel about not having the police there to come and help you if you need them?
I could have got a pizza quicker than I got a policeman. There was a guy outside my window said he had a gun, and this was about 30 years ago. But
was that in New York?
No, it was actually in Tucson.
In Tucson.
But I had 911 operator on the phone. It was not long after 911 started, and they were listening to everything he was saying. They said, we're dispatching him. They're on the way, and they're gonna hang up on me. I said, what? You can't hang up on me. This guy's threatening my life and stuff, and I had just moved into the apartment like a week before, and he was after whoever lived in my apartment before me. Apparently was messing around with his girlfriend, and he obviously didn't know they moved out. So
wow.
Yeah, it was a very scary situation.
Did the police show up?
They showed up 45 minutes later, and the guy had left about 15 minutes before they showed up. For a half hour, he outside my window screaming he's got a gun, he's gonna shoot me and all this stuff. And
So Norm,
It was very scary.
when you called 911, had they just hung up on you because there were no police to come, how would that have made you feel?
Well, they didn't say that. They said they dispatched them. But
I know.
if they said there were no police to come, I wouldn't have called 911 if there was no police to call.
And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a world in which those police are no longer there. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm pointing out. I'm like, so think about it. That day when that was going on, when you'd called 911, if the phone had just rang and rang and rang because no one was there to answer it, or if they'd answered and hung right up because they didn't have anyone to dispatch because the police were no longer there.
That will never happen in this country. I'm
That's
sorry.
what some people want, I think. It's
I
scary.
I think that's just a big rumor. That's all that is. I don't see that ever happening. There's no way society can run without the police. Like I said, 99% of what goes on is done properly and right, but they just don't promote the good part. The media doesn't like good things; they like bad things.
Well, I think the citizenry in America better start thinking about their actions, because when they do things like burning down police stations so the police officers don't have a place to work out of, it kind of affects the police officer's ability to respond to their needs.
Well, like any arson, you should be tried for it and convicted, of course.
Yeah. But I'm just really shocked at the stuff that's gone on in America in the last few weeks with all of the destruction and the mayhem. I feel like my fellow citizens have not matured. What's the opposite of maturing? You know what I mean? It's like they've gone back
They've digressed.
Yeah, they've digressed mentally and emotionally back to children.
Yeah.
And now we've got these children out there like wreaking havoc on our society.
Well, how about the guy in Seattle? The black guy sat at the table asking all the white people to give him $10. I'll say, well, he's dealing it in a civil way. He's dealing with it, but at the same time, I can't understand why just because he's black, he wants white people to give him money like that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
There was a black guy in Seattle who wanted to give people to give him $10.
Yeah.
Was he just on the street corner asking, or was
he had a table set up at wherever they were having a rally and stuff.
So were you able to write your name down so you at least got credit for the donation?
I don't know the particulars of that, but I just caught the headline on the internet news.
Because it seems like if you're going to take payment towards restitution or whatever the idea is, that you would be marking it down,
But if he wasn't even a family, right? If he's raising funeral money for the, that'd be different. But, he's not even related, doesn't even know it, so I think that's ludicrous. I mean, I'm on the bottom of the chain. All my friends of every color but white are all way above me financially and educationally. I mean, I'm low man on the totem pole here. So if anybody should be getting $10 for anybody, it should be me.
I know what you mean, Norm. When everybody has their hand out and everybody feels like a victim, then everybody's a victim and nobody is a survivor. Nobody is succeeding. And that's the problem,
Yep. They're just creating matters worse, making things worse.
And every day we're developing more and more victims, more and more dependents in this country.
Well, I think a lot of them develop themselves.
Well, yeah. Well, but when they're nourished with food and sunshine, when they're encouraged to have that mindset, you know what I mean? What else would you expect?
I don't know. I've always been a explorer, doer, put 110% into everything I got. And that's just because I had parents that did that. I saw by example. And that's all I can attribute any of this to is it's the parents leading by example. I mean, I have no other understanding of why that mentality exists.
Are you saying the parents taught their children to think like that?
No, I'm saying that they just through lack of ambition and lack of motivation trickled down to the children,
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Lack of motivation.
I don't think they consciously said, I want to raise my kids to be deadbeats. It just happens with the mentorship,
Yeah, I know.
And it doesn't mean they're evil people. I'm sure they all have big hearts and they're loving people too.
So Norm, my passport recently expired and I need to go get it renewed, but one of the first countries I plan to visit is CHOP.
Where?
CHOP?
How do you spell that? Oh,
CHOP.
like, chop.
It's the Capitol Hill occupation protest in Seattle. Would you like to go with me?
You need a
sometime?
passport to go to Seattle?
Well, I know I'm not walking in there without my passport because I don't want to become like some kind of a prisoner and have to have like, foreign relations from our U.S. government have to come and rescue me from CHOP.
I'm not aware. Is the state to state requiring passports now?
Oh, well, you don't have to have a passport to go into Washington State or into the city of Seattle, but CHOP, my understanding, is its own country with its own laws. And if I go into CHOP to visit somebody, I may need a passport to get back into the United States, just like if I were in Mexico
Vancouver,
or
like
Canada.
across Puget Sound or something? Or?
It's got its own boundary, its own borders, and its own security. And when you enter, you have to show identification.
So I'm guessing it's in international waters.
You have to obey the laws of CHOP.
It has to be in international waters then.
That's not my understanding. No, according to the mayor, it's right there in Seattle, and it could go on all summer. She's referring to it as like the summer of love. So, I wasn't alive in the '60s, and it sounded like a great time. So I thought I might cruise over there and take a look one of these days.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't imagine they'd hold you to a passport if it's of that kind of mentality.
But it kind of concerns me.
But you got to have an ID on you at all times.
Right.
You go.
Yeah.
That is law.
But do you think so if we don't need our passports, it'd be even easier. Would you like to go with me?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
I'm down.
Yeah, because it's like a lot of cool stuff going on there, I think. So what else has been going on, Norm?
Oh, personally, well, the sobriety's got me, setting up doctor's appointments and knocking them down. I got dental work done. I got a root canal. I got 2 crowns put on. I saw pain management. I refused scripts, of course. I'm getting a new battery for the wires in my back for my sciatic nerve pain. And this new technology, I don't have to recharge it through the skin. The battery's good for 10 years. And there's no even electric current feeling through the sciatic nerve. It just kills the pain. And then they're going to do some nerve burning injections on my neck that'll last 6 months that are non-steroidal. And that'll whip me right back into training with Voc Rehab. And as far as getting out of the halfway house, I know that Voc Rehab will rent an apartment if you're more than 15 miles from the training center. And I checked the map and I'm 26 miles. So.
And which training center are you considering?
Well, I'm considering the adult program at the Children's School for Deaf and Blind. That's 12th and Northern. But I may go back to Savvy for brush up first at 42nd and Thomas. So either way, I'm more than 15 miles away from either one. So they should rent me an apartment. The way the clause reads, they'll rent you an apartment if you're more than 15 miles from the training center and for the first 6 months of employment as well. So whether they take the sound engineering as a serious part-time thing or not, I might, speaking of passports, I might have to go train to work at the passport center, which I've been offered work there before. I just didn't have the training or want to go through it at the time, but it's because I was using and everything went to hell again, and that's the way that goes. So no mas, I'm trying to keep on the straight and narrow, and I got 20, maybe 30 good years left if I keep clean,
So Norm, would you prefer to work at the passport office, or would you prefer to do this? What did you call it? The sound
engineering? Yeah, the jingles for for people's videos.
So,
and
would
stuff.
you prefer to do the sound engineering, or would you prefer to work at like the passport office?
Part of me, because I can't work more than part-time anyways, like maybe 30 hours a week, so I don't go over the cap of making X amount and keeping the disability check. And physically, that's about all I can do. So, I mean, if I could do 30 hours a week at the office and then maybe another 10 or 20 hours a week at home with the engineering, then I would technically be full-time in a way, but then I would have to justify making the money off of the sound engineering, which can be offset with buying more equipment and all the receipts and stuff. It can be offset. So you turn in your receipts month by month to prove that, that money is just being turned back into its own business. So eventually I'll be self-supportive at that and not have to have the part-time job at the office anymore. But full-time anything is still with my conditions, with my back and neck and arm. It's a little, any one task for more than like 30 hours a week would be way too much, even with the new battery and the injections.
Okay. So are you familiar with any computer programs you would need to do this job, and have you been trained on them, or?
I was trained on the Office Windows, the 360. Am I saying that right? I forget. It's been a while.
Office 360?
Yeah, that part. Yeah. I wouldn't take much to brush up on that.
I believe you had told me that there's a person at one of the blind schools that can teach you whatever you need to know about it, right?
Well, as far as the Mac side, because I run Windows through a Mac, but the Mac side would be the sound engineering. I would learn GarageBand and eventually graduate up to the Logic, which is the pro version of it, of the software for that. And there is somebody who does do that training at the Children's School for the Deaf and Blind adult program.
The reason I'm asking, Norm, is because I don't know if you've sat down with your voc rehab counselor yet, but when you do sit down with I believe it's Joe, right?
Well, as far as I know, Joe was the last one who had closed my case at the time because I wasn't continuing training at the moment. I was going through too many physical issues. But I had called voc rehab twice last week, and I did receive a call Friday, and the secretary said she is forwarding all my information, my new number and email, over to Joe and take it from there. I also put a call in for Gail, the counselor at Savvy, to call me. So hopefully she can do some advocating for me as well and try to grease the wheels.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe if you do as much investigating as you can into any training or tools you need to complete this process, and what the expenses are and everything you need, so that when you finally get to talk to Joe about it, if you can give him all the information, and also what your earning capacity would be doing it or whatever, and then he already has the information in front of him, and he'll be able to make a better decision in your favor, if you make sure he has all the correct information,
It's very hard to find that information though, because some people do it for free, some people charge, some people barter. It's hard to really, you can't go on Indeed.com and just find, sound engineering by the hour.
So maybe, well, you don't necessarily have to tell him like what you'd be making per hour, because there's those sliding scales for everything. But maybe if you at least can tell him, this is all the training I would need, this is how to get the training, these are the tools I would need, and then, I just feel like whenever I talked to my voc rehab counselor, and I had 2 of them, it seemed like if I knew what I needed when I first talked to them, that it always went much better,
Yeah, well, it's still all in keeping with my my plan of employment. It was music instrumental is what it was, but technically, it's as long as it's still music related with the instrument, it's still my initial goal. So it's not actually changing up my training.
Do you need specialized recording equipment that will enable you to splice recordings and add stuff in and stuff like that?
It's all in the computer. It's all digitally edited now. It's called GarageBand with the MacBook Pro, and then the desktop version of the Mac is called Logic, which is what the top dogs use in the industry that run Mac. There's other programs that run through Windows.
So do you use a MacBook Pro?
I was given one. I was taught Windows on it, the 360, but the actual Mac stuff, they said I had to, figure out on my own with tutorials, but that's because I did not have this goal at the time of doing music for people's videos. So now that's spin that in there, and that could be a good reason for that training to resume.
Have you looked into the Apple Store to see if they have Mac training classes available? Because they probably do.
I'm only 54 days into recovery. I mean, it's the thing in my support groups, it says right in the scripture, easy does it, it's, you take on too much at once, you get overwhelmed and you're going to relapse. It's just the way it is. So let's get the doctor's stuff out of the way. Let's get knocked down. Let's get my health back in issue. The first 90 days is really the detox period. I mean, it's like I'm just over halfway there. So by the time I get to the 90 days, I'll have all the other appointments knocked out, and then I should be good to roll with focusing on those futuristic things. But right now, I have all I can do just to keep myself together, to fight to just move the first 3 hours of every day. It's not easy. But my mind is clear, and that's keeping me focused on making the appointments and getting to them and making the transportation to get to them and back.
Well, I was not trying to apply any pressure. I just wanted to help you think through the processes if you hadn't already thought through all of them. And it sounds like you have.
Yeah, I mean, I have. I mean, yeah. But beyond the initial talk with voc rehab counseling at this point, until I talk to them, I can't even think further with it. But my standard outpatient, which I start tonight, I was not eligible for intensive outpatient counseling because of that's for people that are still struggling with using, and since I'm committed to not using, they're putting me in standard outpatient counseling. So I'll have group counseling on 5 to 7 Tuesdays and Thursdays starting tonight. So I signed releases for voc rehab and the doctors and my siblings and everybody to get notified on my progress within that structure. As far as my willing independent organization that I go through, it's Narcotics Anonymous, but we're supposed to not really throw it out there. It's really supposed to be a personal, private kind of thing. So, but that is all done on my free will, and that's a self-supportive thing. It's a not-for-profit. It's self-supportive, and everything within there is. See, from the family you get the tough love, and from the group you get the unconditional love, because they are coming from the same place. We're all coming from the same place, one way or another. Whatever your DOC drug of choice was, that doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. Addiction is addiction, and none of us can dabble with it, because if we dabble with it, eventually we're going to relapse into hardcore binging, and that's just the way it is. And a lot of our family members can't understand that, so that's why we need each other in that support group. So as much reinforcement as I can gather during this is the better, because it just it keeps the cravings fewer and farther between, and it keeps the mind in focus on the future and the connection with the higher power. And everybody's higher power is their own individual, whatever they want it to be.
Norm, I feel really positive about not only my future, but your future as well. How do you feel about your future?
Oh, my future's already better. I'm thinking clearly, and I'm making appointments and getting there. And that in itself, to me, is more than I've done for the last 2.5 years. So it can only get better.
Good for you, Norm. So you feel like you're moving ahead with your goals in life, and you don't need any help?
My goal was to get clean for a year. I mean, it took me a year to get to the point to get clean. I mean, it doesn't happen at the first thought. It doesn't happen at the first thought, but you can't kid yourself and say, oh, I can just use mildly and be functional, because then when the trigger points happen, the crisis situations in life, that you're going to binge on harder stuff. That's the addiction disease. And if you don't have it, you won't understand it. So
what alternatives have you found for dealing with crises to drugs?
I dig into my NA literature. I mean, that's number one on your sponsor. You got to get a sponsor. A sponsor is somebody who's got at least 6 months clean time, preferably, years of clean time. And I took about the first probably 3 weeks of doing the meetings every day, and I related to this one guy really good, and I asked him to be my sponsor, and he's been my sponsor since. So, when you real crisis, call the sponsor first, And he's going to tell you to dig into the literature anyways, and then you dig into the literature, and then you get in a meeting that day too. So it's sponsor literature meeting when you start getting the cravings or getting the crisis, the triggers. Yep, sponsor literature meeting.
Well, I'm glad you have a good sponsor too. That's great.
Me too.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to discuss, Norm?
I think the COVID thing we haven't touched upon, have we?
Oh, yeah.
The cases are up dramatically, the percentages since they started opening things up more. So, I mean, should it be pulled back? Should it not? I mean, I've got mixed feelings on that myself.
I think when we decided to reopen the country, I think everybody knew that the cases would rise, and I think everybody knew that it was now or never, and that's what we're doing. And I don't know how reliable the COVID numbers are now, because we've already found proof that they weren't reliable at any point prior to this. So honestly, like throughout the quarantine, I'm gonna do my best to take care of my health and my family's health and practice good, personal hygiene and stuff like that to try to keep from spreading germs. That's really all we can do.
Oh, it's all I've ever done anyway, so nothing changes there for me. But I find the masks, they make me sneeze and cough more, so I've got this little NA bandana that I just use, pull it up, and I can breathe better with that myself.
That's cute.
But but if you're gonna just let it run amok, then why did they even put any limitations to begin with? Why not let it run its course from the beginning? That's the part I don't get.
That's a good question, Norm.
We need to build our immunities to this. We need, the survival of the fittest, and it's just that some people are going to die. I mean, look at the swine flu, the Spanish flu. Look at the Spanish flu. I mean, a lot more people died with that than have from the COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the bubonic plague. I mean, my God, what it wiped out more than half of Europe.
Oh, yeah.
Like 3/4. I mean, but they did not have any modern medicine back then to combat it either. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I heard this rumor that these doctors in Europe worked on bodies they weren't supposed to and found out that it's bacterial, not viral. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just a rumor that I heard.
The corona is viral? Or is
bacterial, not viral? Oh. If that's true, then it could be cured with antibiotics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, I don't think we can really believe anything that we're being told at this point. I think everything that we're told, we better go try to verify it ourselves before we take it as gospel,
Well,
really?
That's the hard part, because if it is true and they want to cover it up, then you're never going to find out anyways.
I recently found out that my favorite TV doctor on TV, Anthony Fauci, can't be trusted. So yeah, I'm really at a loss now, because I love listening to Fauci. He was one of the people I trusted through all this, but then I'm seeing evidence that he's been double talking, and he's been, not necessarily talking on behalf of the American people all the time. So.
Yeah, who knows what their protocol is and why they do what they do and who they do it for. And
well,
behind closed doors, it's a whole different scene than the elbows we rub.
Well, I know I learned back in 1989 that just because a doctor, someone with a lab coat on, tells you something about yourself is not necessarily the truth. And so that's how I'm looking at this whole corona, dude. They may tell me that it can kill me, that it will kill me, but I'll just see, when I finally meet it, if I haven't already, I'll just see what happens, I've survived other stuff that was supposed to kill me.
Yeah, we're really not in the risk category yet, not at that age yet, but I'm sure that smoking cigarettes puts me in a little more jeopardy that way, so hoping to quit those, but everybody in the recovery house I live in smokes, so that's kind of hard till I get out of there to do that. And, I've tried a couple times, and I made it about 2 hours into the next day, and then I'm like, hey, I need a cigarette before I go to the store and get some more.
Oh, quitting smoking is so hard. I managed to quit. Chantix is what did it for me.
I have quit several times at 38 years. Anytime my respiratory got bad, I would quit. And always said it was going to be last time, but after a year or two, and my lungs were better, and again, with the drug usage and then crisis times, and it was easy trigger point to smoke again. And well, that being said, as long as I'm not using again in the future, and I get out of that living situation eventually, I believe quitting will be pretty easy at that point. It's just a matter of exercising quite a bit, and naturally you don't want to smoke when you exercise. But I don't have the physical energy to really do that yet. I try to get out and walk at least a mile a day, and I probably get maybe 4 out of 7 days I do that. It's tough. I have to do it early before it's too hot.
Do you have like sidewalks in your neighborhood where you live, Norm?
Most of the neighborhood, except for the about 2/10 of a mile up the street from the avenue, and then about the 1/10 of a mile from that avenue to the house the street's on, down that. There is a plumbing company next door, and it is just lined with commercial trucks and worker trucks. And it is a mobility nightmare to get from the house to Peoria Avenue.
Are those trucks coming and going all the time too?
Yeah, it changes up. I could leave for a half hour or an hour, come back, and like they're all in different positions and all over the place. Half my transportation drivers miss the road because they have they've got it so you can barely fit one vehicle between the vehicles that are parked on the corners and up the street. Why they don't have their own parking lot or driveways for the company, I don't know. I always yell, "I'm gonna have you ticketed," but I never do, of course, because it's too close to home.
Back home where I used to live, my other house in Montana, one of my neighbors always used to park on the sidewalk. So I had to walk out into the street and walk around their vehicle to gain access to the bus stop. And this really infuriated me because I was blind, walking with a cane, and walking with my small son holding his hand. And so anything that endangered us really aggravated me and made me angry. And like I said, our neighbors parked on the sidewalk every day. And we went down and put a note on the car, and they ignored it. And then one day I got really mad, and I think it was my husband. I don't think I did. I think my husband called the police, and the police showed up. And the officer who responded to the scene, he met me, and I explained to him how I was unable to access the bus stop without walking out into the street, walking around this car. It was either that or walk onto their grass, which wasn't very good in Montana because of the way the lawns are. There's a lot of potholes and stuff on the lawns, and you don't want to mess up their lawns. So I would have to walk out into the street with my son, and so that was going on. So when the officer responded, he assured me, he said, "This is very serious." He said, "This should not go on," and he put a note from the city on their car, and he went and knocked on the door, and they wouldn't even come to the door, but he left a note on their door, right, explaining to them that they should not be parking on the sidewalk. And so I really felt good about how the city handled it, but it wasn't long before they were parking on the sidewalk again, and I moved out like shortly after that. So I never did address it really because I knew I was leaving, but.
Yeah, I don't plan on, I committed myself to 90 days at the recovery house, which is the end of July, and it's already the middle of June. So it's like, I'm not going to make waves there, but I mean, it's a good thing I had a 1.5 years of comprehensive mobility training, because anybody without it could not navigate from that house to Peoria Avenue like I do. There's no way. There's 5 to 10 different commercial and civilian trucks there all the time, always moving around, always changing, and there's no sidewalk. They're not parking on the sidewalk because there is none. So it's like you can't even follow the curb where it's just curb and landscape. You just can't even follow that, because if you follow just that, you're going to have to go in and around every single vehicle. So I just go right up the middle the best I can until I hear a car coming. Then I get over it in between the vehicles, feel my way around like that. But I can't tell you how many side views I've clipped with my shoulder and my arm. And thank God I haven't hit one on my face yet, but that's just a matter of time, I'm sure. But as careful as I can be and as good as I am at it, it's still a nerve-wracking experience every day doing it.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't think about unless they're blind and travel around with a cane regularly.
Put it this way, the sighted guys in the house don't go out and walk over to the store like I do. It's like they don't even want to deal with it.
And you do?
Yeah.
That's impressive,
There's
Norm.
like 2 or 3 of them with cars, and then they'll drive out, and most of them work. They're not around during the day anyways. And the other ones, unless they absolutely have to go get something, they don't go out. I buy 1 or 2 things a day, so I have a reason to get out and walk. I have to move. I have to, get my blood pumping. So I force myself to do it, but it's not fun.
So Norm, now that you're getting out more and stuff is starting to open back up, when you're out, do you feel like things are going well out there in the community? You feel like people are starting to normalize, things are normalizing again and people are becoming...
There's still, 6 feet between the next customer and the register, and you can hear people, I hear people talking through their masks still. But, I don't so much worry about it in a ventilated store, and everybody's keeping their distances. It's not, I don't wear the masks that much. It's more in the vehicles that I do, or any store that requires you have a mask on to go in.
Thank you for discussing all this, Norm. I really appreciate your input today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Glad to get out of the house. And
have you gotten your hair cut recently?
I used a horsehair brush on it today. Yes, one of the housemates had trimmed it up for me about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he's since moved on. He got a big unemployment check and got his own apartment and moved on.
So,
but yeah, that's my cut for the year. I'm good for now. Probably let it go again until spring.
What about your facial hair? Like, have you had problems getting your facial hair cut through the quarantine? Because
I've had problems affording razor blades.
Affording razor blades?
So I let it go for like a week at a time, and then I take my electric groomer and take it down to a shavable level, and then I'll shave it once a week. So that way I can get like two or 3 weeks out of one cartridge.
So you don't go to the barber shop then?
No, I can't afford to pamper myself that way now.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, but someday back to work, that'll change.
Well, that's a good thing to look forward to, Norm.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for participating today, Norm, and talking about all of this. Is there anything else you'd like to say on the topic of defunding or supporting the police?
If anything, more money for more education for them so this stuff stops happening.
So more education and more training?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Norm. I really appreciate your sentiments, and I agree. I don't think we should be cutting their funding. Thank you for joining us today on Becca's World. We hope you enjoyed this candid conversation, and we also hope that you are not opposed to our police. I think we all need to support them. Please like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Peace out. Thank you for watching Becca's World. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel.